As always, we're broadcasting from suburban community channels in White Bear Lake, simulcasting through CTV in Roseville, replaying through SPNN in St. Paul on Monday nights, replaying through Valley Access in the Stillwater area, replaying through South Washington. So I think there's about 50 cities that get to see Inside Insight and see what government is up to. All right, as always, everything that's presented on the show is well documented, researched, and thought out, and presented as the opinion of me, your host, Bob Zick. If you're watching the show live, feel free to call in with your questions and comment. If you're watching it any other time, it's a retelevised edition, so don't bother anybody around here. Thank you.
Now let me see if I got the facts straight here.
Want the truth? Well, and you know, the first recourse is to just come on the show. Call into the show.
Yes.
If you don't think something
absolutely.
we say is accurate, is misleading, is disinformation, you can call on the show or you can come on the show. We want to play on
Caller,
that
are
too.
you with us?
Yeah, you guys don't get paid enough.
You want answers?
I think I'm entitled.
You want answers?
I want the truth!
You can't handle the truth.
I'll tell you, the circus doesn't end.
I will dream up a migraine faster than a speeding bullet.
Faster than a speeding bullet. More powerful than a locomotive. Able to leap tall buildings at a single bound. Look, up in the sky, it's a bird.
It's a plane!
Yes, it's
Bob Zick.
a strange visitor from another planet who came to Earth with powers and abilities far beyond those of mortal men. And who, disguised as Clark Kent, mild-mannered reporter for a great metropolitan newspaper, fights a never-ending battle for truth, justice, and the American way.
Welcome to Inside Insight News Hour. I am your host, Bob Zick, and this is December 17th, 2014. So if you're watching the show live, feel free to call in with your questions or comments. We have a great show for you tonight, by the way. We have the totally dysfunctional, ineffective St. Paul's School Board under the lack of leadership of Superintendent Valeria Silva and the board that hopefully after the election will have a whole new makeup. If you read Saturday's paper, we're going to get into that. A lot of video, a lot of First Amendment violations when the assistant chair, or maybe it was even the superintendents, had your host escorted out of the school board by the police because they didn't like to hear the school board only wants to embrace their agenda, and if you're down there with their kind of comments, they'll listen to you. If you're down there to tell them that the emperor has no clothes, okay. They're saying, I just got a note from the control room, they're going to have about 10 minutes for the first video. We have some video also from this was yesterday's St. Paul School Board meeting, but also yesterday we had a cameraman down at the Minnesota Supreme Court hearing. It was a public hearing, and it was in regard to having cameras in the courtroom. And this was before the Minnesota Supreme Court. It was 11 o'clock yesterday, room 300 of the courtroom. And of course, Inside Insight we had a camera down there, but our cameraman, can you imagine this? That they're having a public hearing on the value of having cameras or a camera in the courtroom. And our cameraman had a fight to have his camera in an open public hearing. This wasn't a court case. This was not a court session. There was no buddy on trial for anything. And so, I mean, it was just the irony of it all. But we prevailed. All right. So you're going to hear Mr. Davis from the Pioneer Press and the Supreme Court Justice Lily Hogg is going to ask for a definition of media. And so you have to remember, in Indiana, films everything in the courtrooms. Very open system. When you hear, like we have, and have followed these different cases where we have documented that these judges they do such outrageous things where they actually alter transcripts, alter testimony. I mean, it goes on. And without video recording, these judges get to get away with this stuff. So you can understand why they don't want cameras in the courtroom. And so, the lame excuse is always that, witnesses will be hesitant to testify. But we're going to show you tonight, all these public hearings, these people aren't timid about getting up and speaking their piece. And there's cameras recording all this. And we already have a phone call. So before we get too far ahead of ourselves, we have both the Pioneer Press. We're going to reference this from Saturday. Teachers sour on St. Paul Public School Board foursome. And we're going to talk about why that's necessary and why that is good to have. What they're talking about is dumping Mary Dorn, the chair, Keith Hardy, the assistant chair, Ann Carroll, and Louise Seba. So there's some real problems down there, and we're going to do that. Today's Pioneer Press and today's Star Tribune, and of course your host was mentioned in the Pioneer Press today, so we'll probably read that. All right, they're saying let's take the phone call first, and then we'll play the video clip. Caller, are you with us? Question or comment?
Well, Bob, I got a comment for you.
Yes.
You've been following the Montemita schools, and the headline in the White Bear Press is Montemita schools tax levy jumps more than $2 million. Okay, they went from a $11.05 million budget to a $13.22. That's an increase of $2.17 million in that from the old levy to the new levy. So that's about a 20% increase. Of course, with the 34% open enrollment that's fueling this, the poor people are going to get their tax statements are going to fall over. What was the interesting anomaly, mostly they send the proposed tax statements out in the middle of January. This year, for some unknown reason, they came out the end of November before the levy numbers were computed. I think that's to keep residents from having heart attacks, personally. But anyway, I just thought I would mention that because I was in the White Bear Press on page 9A. Montemita schools tax levy jumps more than $2 million. That was probably a very unhappy Christmas present for a lot of residents. They're not going to be particularly pleased, and you've been following this, and so you can comment on that, and I'll listen on the other side.
Caller, before you hang up, that $2 million reflected what percentage increase?
20%.
20%. But now if you take that 20%, you have to increase it by a third because open enrollment students, their parents don't pay or contribute to that. So that 20% is shouldered entirely by the citizens of the Matamidi district. So you have to, on their tax statement, it's actually going to be a third higher yet.
Oh, that's right. And the problem is going to be these residents are going to get their tax statements and they're going to be shell-shocked because it's going to go up quite a bit. And, you know, there's already a lot of homes. What's really interesting, there's a lot of larger homes out in this area, and they go up proportionately more. And there's a lot of people that are trying to retire and get out of these 5,000 square foot McMansions. And the tax bills are $6,000, $10,000, $12,000. When you're paying $1,000 a month for property tax, that kind of bites into the old grocery budget, you know?
And so those people are going to see a 26 to 27% tax increase from the school district. Well,
oh, absolutely. I wonder if you can pay that in food stamps, you think?
Well, that's where most of the people are going to end up after they realize they can't pay their taxes.
The other thing I was going to ask you, are you going to be coming to the presiding in the grant when they put the two new council people in? I was going to offer you could have the popcorn and Band-Aid concession.
I'll be there, but I don't want to run the concession stand. Thank you, caller.
Okay, bye.
All right, we're going to go right into some video here so we don't get too far behind. This is the Supreme Court, and what you want to listen for is the acknowledgement of this show, public cable television. All right. Go ahead and play this. We'll talk about it after.
Please be seated. We have one matter for hearing this morning, a hearing on proposed amendments to the general rules of practice. The record should reflect that we have received a request to record today's proceedings. The request did not comply with our 24-hour notice requirement. However, under Rule 134.10, I'm authorized to waive that notice requirement, and I am waiving it and allowing the proceedings to be recorded.
All right, that was our cameraman, had a fight to have that waiver. In other words, you know, when is a public hearing not a public hearing? Only when government doesn't want it to be a public hearing. So, yes, we prevailed, and now you're going to see the next part of this. Go ahead.
Sir, before you leave the podium, we've had two presentations, one from a major media company, and you work for a major media company. But it strikes me that the definition of media is quite different than it was 7 years ago, and might well include bloggers who wish to post live video or recorded video on their websites, people who have cable TV shows, where long-form video may be important. Could you address the change in the media landscape and how you think that cuts with respect to the proposal that's before the court?
Yeah, I think the change cuts in favor of transparency. With streaming, for example, people can see live as it happens or on recording everything that happens in the courtroom from gavel to gavel. This to me is an improvement in coverage. Seeing what actually happens in the courtroom, I think, is an improvement over people standing outside the courtroom and telling people what happened inside the courtroom. There's been an increase in live coverage. The Uptake is one of the organizations in Minnesota that provides coverage of proceedings, and I find it educational. I can't be everywhere, so it's good to be able to watch a committee proceeding from gavel to gavel and see actual testimony instead of just relying on what reporters with limited space might tell you afterwards. I would say the change in the media landscape actually argues in favor of more transparency.
All right. In favor of the new media landscape, the Inside Insight News Hour. The Supreme Court understands this, but the St. Paul School District doesn't understand this. the Valeria Silvas, the Keith Hardys, the Mary Dorns, they believe in censorship. They believe in making sure that the only speech that's allowed is the speech that they want to hear. This is, remember in Maplewood, Billy Rosbach, and I'm told that Billy Rosbach has secured some kind of commission position. You know, they take care of themselves. The system makes sure, because this is all part of the DFL machine. So I'm sure that Mayor Slawick, with whatever connections she has down at the Capitol left over, got the Willie Rosbach a position. And we're going to talk about this in terms of, as we go through this video, in terms of the nepotism that goes on, whether it's Valeria Silva or whether it's Tony Carter, or, you know, these people that benefit from government, that love government, that are on the receiving end of government, that fill their pockets from government, and the rest of the people have to pay for their well-being. So let's take, and I want to start out, we're going to go with some video tonight on, excuse me, on the St. Paul schools. And this is from last night. And of course, Saturday's paper, it talks about the people I mentioned, Mary Dorn, Keith Hardy, Ann Carroll, and Louise Seba. The teachers union are encouraging new candidates to run for the 4 seats up for grabs in the school board next year. And, you know, this is because of the, they're discouraged with the incumbents. And when you watch what we present tonight, you ought to be discouraged too. Of course, down there last night, the school board paraded in all their people that wanted to give them accolades. I don't know. They must have some kind of a phone list or something how to bring these people forward. So, you know, some of the comments that were made about the efforts of teachers were very good. Yes, the teachers very much want to make sure that all students achieve to their full ability, that these teachers are tired of having this St. Paul district and this Pacific Education Group refer to them as racist and institutional racism. This is what propels all this stuff. And so to that end, watch this. And I mean, St. Paul has their own Jesse Jackson and Al Sharpton, the people that benefit off of that. They keep racism in the forefront. Tony Carter, we're going to show you her. So watch this stuff and see how this game is played. All right, let's start with the first piece. This is to set it up. This is the chair, Dorn, and watch her comments. And remember, as we go here, what is said and what reality is and what the truth is are not the same. So listen to her comments, and then we're going to explain this as we go along. All right.
Public comment is an opportunity for the board to listen. It is not a time to engage in dialogue. As a general rule, the board will not comment on or respond to any comments made by speakers.
All right, that applies to everybody except your host, in which case we don't like your host. We don't like the hard issues that he brings. So we're going to silence him. We're going to impose our speech into his allotted time, and then we're going to gavel him down, and then we're going to have the police remove him. And I'm going to read you the full comments that I had and that I didn't get to finish, but we will include that. All right, let's play some more of this so you understand where she's at. And this next rule was put in there because of Inside Insight News Hour, that we don't endorse certain shows. Okay, play the next little clip.
Programs, products mentioned during public comment are not endorsed by the board or the Board of Education or St. Paul Public Schools. Please begin by stating your name only.
Programs, the Inside Insight program. Folks, when we go through this, just keep in mind one thing, that the school district looks at the education of children as a process, and they move children through the process. It's like cheese. We have a process for making cheese. So we have a process for moving these children through. And so that's an explanation. And then we're going to also get into this explanation of dumping. When you hear later on this chair talk about how outraged she is that I use the term dumping, we're going to explain what dumping means. Obviously, it doesn't matter that I'm outraged with the way the school district takes and comes down on people they don't like and finds that offensive. It's more than offensive. It's a violation. But watch these series of clips that we've taken from the whole meeting last night, and you'll get a sense of what's going on there. We're going to start with, I think, this first one. This is called Sherwin LaChapelle, and she is the president of the Black Ministers Association. She likes to use the word Nazi. So let's watch her explain about how we should have the right to express our thoughts and opinions, but only if they meet the agenda that certain groups of people they have, and if you don't have these, well, then it's our right to censor you. So let's play this first speaker here.
Hi, Sherwin LaChapelle, President of the Minnesota Black Nurses Association. I salute you, Superintendent Silva, for having the wherewithal to see an injustice and to speak about it honestly and to give your view, your opinion that's protected by the Constitution. I resent the fact that the police union here, as well as in other cities, have come against those individuals who choose to exercise their freedom of speech and to express their own opinion. So, with that being said, I think the police union should go back and clean up their own home. I think those police who are committing these acts against the public good, shooting down innocent, unarmed citizens, that they need to go and look within their ranks, concentrate on cleaning up that mess. And once they've done that, maybe we won't have these negative things to say. This is not Nazi Germany. And stormtroopers will not take away our rights. So I suggest they go back and clean it up. Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend LaChapelle.
Okay, you heard the crowd clapping. That's the sentiments. The issue was, and this is from Saturday's paper about the, no, it's not Saturday, it's from the prior week. You saw all the letters to the editor about the superintendent's unprofessional remarks. And I'm going to comment about this when we play the segment of less than half of what I had to say down there. And just remember that your opinion is protected by the Constitution. Your speech, except when it comes to your host, that's not down there to praise this superintendent that should do the right thing and resign. All right, let's play the next person. This is Tony Carter now, this next person. And you need to know, remember that Tony Carter gets about $90,000 a year in benefits on top. And she, let's see, a county board member meets, an hour or two every couple of weeks. Tough job. And this person, I call her the I want person. She's full of herself. I want. And remember, her husband is a retired St. Paul police officer, and they get to retire at age, 50, with 90% of their salary. And then, of course, her son was on the St. Paul City Council, and he resigned from there. I think he took a position with the Minnesota Education Society. Of course, Carter, I think, had worked for the St. Paul schools. Tony Carter had worked for St. Paul schools early on. So, very much the recipient of what the taxpayers have to offer. That family, it has been well taken care of. So, of course, they're going to support the system that supports them. Doesn't matter about the rest of you. They want it. They have the good life. All right, so let's play Tony Carter here. And of course, Tony Carter, she said, as I was being escorted out by the police officer, I'm down there defending the police in what went on. And, well, you'll hear it. And so they, I don't know, somebody called me up today that watched the school board meeting last night, and they said, Bob, with what went on down there, that isn't it ironic that the black man threw the white man out, used the police to throw the white man out? I said, boy, I'm not going to touch that one. All right, let's go ahead and play the next piece here. This is Carter.
Good evening. My name is Tony Carter. As a member of the Ramsey County Board of Commissioners, I want all of us right now to ask questions, to think deeply, to negotiate. I appreciate the inclusion.
Think deeply, inclusion. Think deeply and inclusion. But not for your host to get up and question what's going on here. See, this is what's phony about these people. These people, if you're dancing to the same song that they want to dance to, you're a fine fellow. If you don't, and we're not going to tolerate you. We're going to boo you and we're going to shout at you. Listen to this. Let's play the next piece. And when I'm down...
Hey, Mr. Zick.
Good evening, Board. I am Bob Zick, 28-year employee of the school district, member of the press, host of Inside News Hour, St. Paul Neighborhood Network, cable channel 15, Wednesday night, 8:30 to 9:30. for the full needed discussion. We will discuss on the comments of everything that was said here tonight. There's been much outrage written and said about your superintendent, Valeria Silva's unprofessional tweet regarding her quandary of how to explain the lawlessness and riot in Ferguson, Missouri to St. Paul black students. Your superintendent has taken this district on a road of destruction with only one voice. You know, I listen to you. You ought to have the courtesy to listen to somebody else. There's more than one view out here. Thank you.
All right, okay.
Your superintendent has taken this district on a road of destruction with only one voice in the wilderness crying out, and that lone voice you have crucified and silenced. Your superintendent has led this district into the desert. This district has embraced one education experiment after another. Profile for learning, race to the top, Common Core, no child left behind. I ask, how has that been working out? Achievement goes down, the achievement gap gets bigger. 1 out of 3 students never finish school. Our schools are a war zone. Teachers are being assaulted. EBD and special ed kids dumped into the classroom to completely disrupt and assault the learning that can't take place. The only thing that goes up is the $680 million annual budget and the number of administrators. One phony made-up award for the superintendent after another. One more administrator paraded out with yet one more charter graph. $1 more million.
Thank you, Mr. Zick.
Thank you, Mr. Zick.
Mr. Zick, thank you.
And Mr. Zick, I told you last time, I don't appreciate you suggesting that our children are dumped. That's very offensive, and I won't tolerate that. Talking about our students who are not here to defend themselves. So please refrain from speaking about our students in that manner. Thank you. We're going to move on to the next thing.
Security.
Thank you. There we go. Thank you. We're going to move on to recognitions.
I'm going to read the rest of the comments that they didn't want you to hear. But isn't it interesting that the, and you did notice because this is what one of the viewers called me about, the black man calling the police, security, take him out of here. You got to get that white guy out of here. You know, she's offended by the word dumped. Well, folks, these emotional, behavioral, dysfunctional students, these special ed kids, and I stand by this, were dumped into the mainstream classroom, and they have caused havoc with the education of the rest of the students. And why do I say the word dump? Because first of all, the teachers weren't notified that this was going to happen. There was no preparation for this. All of a sudden, you know, it's one thing if you have 1 or 2 kids in a classroom, but when you have 4, 5, 6 in a classroom, the teeter-totter is tilted, and now the out of control, dysfunctional kids take over the classroom. And we had very much testimony. We played some of that from the previous school board meetings of parents testifying that their kids are being cheated out of an education. So one, this was not told, this conversation was not presented at a school board level where the school board openly made these decisions. This was done by the superintendent. Boom, the beginning of the school year, all the special ed and EBD kids are dumped into the classroom. The teachers weren't prepared for this. There weren't additional staff to help in this endeavor. It was up to the classroom teacher. I ask you, does that sound like a fair definition of being dumped? You know, these school board members need to do some self-reflection. You know, when she said, "I will not tolerate you," well, she has the power of government. She has the power of the police. The police, I can't have the police remove her as chair. I can't have the police remove this superintendent that has destroyed the school district. I don't have that power. I don't have the power of Keith Hardy to say security. They have the power of government. They have the power of police. I only have the power of the press, the power of what we show you, the video. Remember, do your own critical thinking here. So this is what went on down there. Now, I'm gonna read exactly the whole comment that I prepared for the school board, and then to me, and I had other people look at this, and everybody said, "Bob, you're right on." And there's nothing that you say here that should be silenced, that you shouldn't have the right to say, that people shouldn't be able to hear this. So, there has been much outrage written and said about Superintendent Valerie Silva's unprofessional tweet regarding her quandary of how to explain the lawlessness and rioting in Ferguson, Missouri to the St. Paul black students. Now, have you seen the latest videos that are out there of the individual that supposedly was murdered by the police? There's a video out now that shows him and one of his friends beating up a very senior black man, severely beating him. These are the things that we're supposed to emulate as, you know, the police shouldn't control this kind of behavior. Police shouldn't protect citizens from this kind of person. Why? Because this person was black, and this person has a different a set of rules that they get to live by. Sorry. Your superintendent has taken this district on a road of destruction with only one voice in the wilderness crying out, and that lone voice you have crucified and silenced. And who is that lone voice? That was John Broderick, talking about the conditions in the public schools, the way the teachers are abused, the way the district has pushed out the senior teachers. Why don't you think St. Paul schools can't get substitute teachers? Because none of them want to go back into that war zone. And so when Broderick spoke out, he was ostracized for it. John has been muffled. And so you need to understand what goes on up there. That's why did 9 teachers at Murray Junior High quit since the beginning of the school year? That's how bad it is. Well, Ramsey, I'm sorry. Well, Murray is just as bad. And all these schools, it's atrocious. These kids know there is no consequence to their action. If a teacher defends themselves and actually physically tries to stop an attack by touching a student, they're going to lose their job. Why do you think teachers are sick of it? Your superintendent has led this district into the desert. This district has embraced one education experiment after another. Profile for learning, race to the top, Common Core, no child left behind. The question I presented, How has this been working out? You see the failed performance of St. Paul schools? St. Paul achievement gap is worse than Alabama's. And this superintendent, this school board wants to reward her. Achievement goes down, achievement gap gets bigger. 1 out of 3 students never finish school. Our schools are a war zone. Teachers being assaulted, EBD and special ed kids dumped into the classroom to completely disrupt and assault the learning that can't take place. The only thing that goes up is a $680 million annual budget and the number of administrators. One phony made-up award for the superintendent after another. Last week, we talked about those phony awards. You know, one hand washes the other. One more administrator paraded out with yet one more chart or graph or survey. They got all this whole layer of people down there that constantly has to justify their existence by reinventing the wheel. Here's our new graph, here's our new chart, here's our new survey. One more $1 million consultant, the Pacific Education Group. Remember, that's the group they brought in here, that all problems are racial, that all the failures to achieve is racial, institutional racism, teacher racism, never mind these students' home life, their economic condition, the lack of a supportive family. None of that matters. The trauma in their life, it's just this racial bias of the school district and the teachers. One more study, one more program, and one more layer of administrators. Then I wanted to do an example of failed education. 3 of the big new car dealerships I do business with cannot get enough qualified auto mechanics. It doesn't happen. They have forced overtime to try to deal with the number of auto repairs these are big dealerships now. This district has gutted the shop classes out of our schools. When I went to St. Paul schools, we had shop classes from the 7th grade through the 12th grade. They had wood shop, they had metal shop, they had mechanical drawing, they had auto shop. There was art classes, music classes, and librarians. This has all been gutted by this superintendent. Now you have iPads for all students. Isn't that wonderful? All students from grade school all up. We're all going to have iPads. Can you imagine going in and applying for a job at a auto dealership, and they say, well, do you know how to fix cars? Well, I can look it up on my iPad. Or, well, can you wire a house? Well, you know, maybe I can read about it. You know, this is atrocious. You know, what does all this computers? What does it prepare these students for? They can be checkout clerks, or they can be cashiers at McDonald's. But they can't wire a house, they can't plumb a building, and they can't repair a car. The other thing is, these students, our students, can't make simple change without a machine. Most are incapable of critical thinking, not being able to separate government and media lies and fiction from the truth. It's deplorable. Not being able to separate government and media lies and fiction from the truth. Critical thinking, not there. Let's take, before I read the last little bit, let's take the phone call. Caller, are you with us? Question or comment?
Comment, Bob. One of the problems has been is they got rid of all the vocational, you're right, and they're sending everybody to college. But you realize 27% of college graduates get a job in their field. 44% are either unemployed or underemployed. Okay, And I think you were at the same meeting that I was at with Montemita Schools. The man that owns 5 Mac dealerships got up and said, I apply for an office manager for $15 an hour and I get 2,000 applications. And I have an application out for a diesel mechanic for $70,000 to $80,000 a year, and I can't get 2 applications. What's wrong with this picture? We need skilled technicians. Here's some other statistics. In 1950, 20% of the jobs required a college education, 15% labor. 65% were labor and 15% were skilled technicians. Fast forward to 2000, 20% need a college degree, 15% are labor, but we need 65% skilled technicians. They have to fix your furnace, your plumbing, your car, any number of other things that we have. And we have a vocational deficit in this country, and it's just a travesty. Of course, these educated fools, everybody's going to college, but 27% are getting jobs in their field. I'll hang up and you can make a comment on the other side.
I will. Case in point, one of the last industrial shops I tore out of, this was out of Johnson High School. It was the wood shop and metal shop, and what did they replace it with? An exercise room. An exercise room. So you're going to go apply for a job and say, well, what are you good at? And then you can say, well, I'm good at physical exercise. I know how to work out and stay in shape. Well, can you do anything that we can sell to our customers? No, but I can exercise. Folks, this is your superintendent. This is supposed to be your leader. You can see why this person needs to go. All right, do we have another phone call? Caller, are you with us? Question or comment?
Yes, question and comment.
Go ahead.
Okay, hello, Bob.
Yeah.
I am a teacher from Europe with a teaching degree that came to this country only to find out that St. Paul schools are daycare for teenagers. That's how I call them. The high schools here are daycare for teenagers. Now, my 3 children went through the high school here, and I was there 110% to try to add a little bit more education into their heads. Otherwise, they will be just like a grass. You pour a little water on them, they grow, and that's the end of their story. I never worked here as a teacher because I just didn't see that it's going to work with my criteria and what's available as teaching fact. So I agree with everything you said. I do have grandchildren now. 2 of them are actually graduating from high school now. And I really worried about their level of information that they get in high school, about knowledge, about the critical thinking on their own, about iPads, about popular thing. It's something about being popular. Popular means probably the airhead that doesn't know nothing, just goes from party to party, and that's a very popular person in high school. So it's sad. It's sad. I'm deeply disappointed in my grandkids' knowledge. What's the medication for all of that? I don't know. I leave it to you. And I really hope that you will have enough strength to do something. And it's really, the way it looks, it's disaster.
Thank you, caller. Appreciate those comments.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
And what I would say in terms of your grandchildren, get them out of the St. Paul School District. We played it last week or the week before, where the parents were talking about other parents that have removed their children from the public schools. The teachers, as a percentage, have the as a group, are the largest percentage of parents that put their children in non-public schools. And they know something because they see what's going on there. You know, part of this, when you talk about your grandchildren, this Common Core, folks, you need to understand this. The things that are being promoted with this sexual, explicit teaching that's going on to grade school children, if they found that stuff on your computer, you would be charged with pornography. And yet they're in the school system, they can teach this stuff to your children as education. You know, your children lose their innocence so quick in the public school system. The best thing you can do is to get them out of there. Remember the superintendent, Valeria Silva, said she was going to increase by 3,000 the number of students to help balance that budget? Didn't happen, did it? It's going the other way. I want to finish this. $680 million annual budget, $19,000 per student per year. That's what it costs you, the taxpayers. We, the taxpayers, could send all of St. Paul students to private schools for half the cost. Parochial non-public grade schools, and I checked this, you can do the same, call some of the parochial non-public schools, charge between $4,000 to $5,000 per year. High schools, like Cretin High School, charge less than $12,000, and these kids actually graduate and go on to college. $12,000, not compared $19,000, and turning out kids that need a machine to make simple change. If public, this is in regard to, they hold these public comments at 5:30. If public comment was not at 5:30, there would be a whole lot more irate parents, teachers, and taxpayers down at these school board members. People need, and in closing, people need to read the Saturday's Pioneer Press front page article, Teachers Sour on St. Paul Public School Board. So that was the comments that they didn't want to hear, that they had the police officer walk me out because, you know, it didn't fit their agenda last night. The people that were there were the people that embrace this failed system. They wonder why their own students are losing the battle. It's because they embrace a superintendent like Valeria Silva. Now you have to remember Valeria Silva. Talk about her. You know, her $200,000 annual salary doesn't include benefits. I think she gets $2,000 a month car allowance and these performance evaluations. Remember when she got $40,000 to move back into St. Paul, and I always said she should have stayed in Woodbury so she could talk to all the people that were fleeing St. Paul and understand why they were leaving. And, you know, look at her son. This is over at Hazel Park. First he was a TA, and the report was that caught 5 times at Hazel Park smoking dope. And then she moved him over to Rondo, I think it was Capitol Hill, made him an education assistant, from a teaching assistant to education assistant. I believe he didn't have a driver's license, lost that for whatever reason. So the assistant principal at Hazel Park would pick him up and give him a ride to school. You know, these people, I mean, it's just like Tony Carter. It's just ripe with, you know, if you're a winner in the process, it's wonderful. But if you're a loser, if you're one of those 1/3 that never graduate, shame on the superintendent, shame on the school board. You know why the St. Paul School Board can't get rid of the superintendent? They hired her. They would have to admit that they failed. So what do? They keep embracing her. Well, she's wonderful. We just need to tweak her a little bit. You know, it's a failed school board. All right, we have one more clip I want to play. Now, this person is Steve Marchese. And Steve is one of the people that's going to run for the St. Paul School Board to try to right the ship. All right, let's listen to his comments.
Good evening, members of the board and Superintendent Silva. My name is Steve Marchese, and I speak as a father of two boys in the St. Paul schools, as one in Capitol Hill in 6th grade and one in 9th grade at Central. The success of our district is very personal to me. I also speak as a lawyer who has worked earlier in my career to represent families and children in special education proceedings, as well as African American parents and children in school desegregation litigation in Michigan. I'm also speaking as a current and former board member of several nonprofits and municipal commissions in St. Paul and Minneapolis over the last 2 decades, and I'm speaking as a resident of the Summit University neighborhood who cares very much about the future of our city and the investments we're making on behalf of all of our children. When more than 30 parents from Ramsey Middle School need to raise the alarm at a recent board meeting about violence in their school, problems the administration knew about but failed to act on, we have a problem. When the board barely takes a month to approve a multi-million-dollar contract for iPads with little input from parents and teachers and without a clear plan to support how they will improve instruction, we have a problem. When a major restructuring of middle schools results in 6th graders pushed into overcrowded buildings at the same time as the very laudable effort to mainstream special needs students, we have a problem. As a former member of the St. Anthony Park Elementary Site Council, I watched as central administration took decision-making authority away from schools and brought it to 360 Colburn. This has left the people who live every day in the school buildings, teachers, parents, school principals, and support staff with little influence over what happens in their own building. Time and again, the administration, with the support of the board, has pursued an important and well-intentioned effort to increase educational equity. But it's been undermined at times by poor communication and questionable administrative decisions. Educational equity is too important to be undermined by poor implementation. We don't need to choose between equity and competence, and we don't have to put members of our community against each other. We have to effectively address disparities in our community, and we need all hands on deck. We need an independent school board to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Marchese.
Yes.
Right on. The question was called in. What do you think about renewing of Silva's contract? Well, again, I said that. This school board can't admit their mistakes. She should absolutely not have her contract renewed. What is your opinion of the Minneapolis superintendent resigning? Well, let me read these comments, and you decide which superintendent this applies to. One of the nation's largest achievement gap, dramatically disproportionate suspension rates for students of color, and a growing number of parents pulling their students from city schools. School boards gave her a low mark for boosting student achievement. Well, you know, the comment about it goes on about suspensions. The superintendent for St. Paul schools put in place a bonus for principals and assistant principals if they didn't take and suspend students. What does that teach these students? There's no consequences. I mean, this is the Minneapolis superintendent, St. Paul superintendent. The gap in math and reading test scores between students of color and white students have widened. Thank you. Good night. I'm your host, Bob Zick.